patient, because our God is patient with us. Let's be patient with our children. And as I said at the beginning, there are no guarantees in child rearing. We do our best, and then we celebrate the fruit if it turns out good, and we grieve when it doesn't turn out so good. We have to be prepared for that. And let's be careful about giving accolades and medals to parents because the children turned out so well. Be careful who to give credit to. I mean, by God's grace, some of our children turn out so wonderful. I mean, I know that we ask, if it's bad, who's responsible for this? And if it's good, and again, I want to know who the parents. I'm not sure that's really fair. There are no guarantees in this business. So be careful how you think of them. Be careful how you think about children. Remember the Lord Jesus and his response to the disciples, rebuking those who brought his children to be blessed. Because they were thought of according to their culture, not according to how Jesus had instructed them. They thought they were doing Jesus a big favor by keeping kids away. But in fact, they were making him very displeased because of the way they thought of children. Kind of Victorian thinking of children. Children should be seen, not heard. So if you're a child among others, just be quiet. It's okay to be seen, but not to be heard. Your opinion doesn't matter. Your feelings don't matter. And that's actually very African. We're very proud of having children, but when we receive children, we treat them as second class or maybe third class children, third class human beings. So let's be careful how we think of them. Let's think of how God thinks of us. We are precious. Image bearers, I thank you because I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Where did the psalmist get that from? He's thinking about himself in the way that God sees him. And that's just so helpful to have those kinds of truths about the way we think of one another and so on. One of the things, like this is the next thing, maybe I'll leave it here. It is the simple needs sometimes that our children have. And as Christians, sometimes we make things unnecessarily complicated. Let me give you a scenario. Remember the little child who had been sick, presumably, before she died, and then she died, and then Jesus comes in and raises her from the dead. Just wondering what would have happened if it happened today. Go to the neighbors, have a prayer meeting, have a Thanksgiving service, do something spiritual that just acknowledges our gratitude to God. We're going to have a Thanksgiving service because our child who was dead is now alive. I like the way that Jesus responds afterwards. Very simple, very straightforward. Hey, give us something to eat. I'm still remembering a sermon in Venice, the king with the common task. Give us something to eat. I'm so spiritual about that. The poor kid was probably didn't have a good appetite because she was sick before she died. So she probably needs to eat something. And just give her something to eat. And to me that's so insightful, so profound, and yet so simple. And sometimes we are looking for big revolutionary needs in our children for us to meet. Give us something to eat. She's hungry. The same thing with God treating one of his servants, Elijah. You remember when Elijah was so depressed after he ran away from Jezebel, and he's exhausted. He wants God to take away his life, and I'm the only one left. Israel doesn't listen to me. My ministry is really useless, and I throw in the towel. And God doesn't engage in theological discussion. God doesn't start arguing with him. Elijah, how can you talk like that? And haven't you seen these 7,000? God doesn't respond to him like that. He he just prescribes some very simple treatment. Some rest, some food. And after he wakes up, how is he doing? I think some more rest, some more food. And then afterwards, his depression is so lifted that when God says, Elijah, what was that? Well, I did say that my ministry is useless and I'm the only one, but it's not talking about, take my life anymore. I know he's ready to engage with God. And God says, well, okay, actually I've got an assignment for you. I want you to go and anoint this one as king. I want you to hand over to Elisha. And, I've got things for you to do. And Elijah, there is no sense of, but I'm useless, but, that has gone. But the treatment has been very simple. It hasn't been complicated theological arguments that God engages Elijah. Oh, by the way, there were 7,000 others who did not bow the knee. And you think, 7,000, you didn't see any of them. When you're depressed, you become very myopic. It's amazing how depression or how pain dulls our ability to see and to hear. The Apostle Paul, you remember, the thorn in the flesh, how it so made him deaf. God had to repeat himself 3 times before he heard the answer to his prayer. Because he was very clear, as far as he was concerned, the answer to my prayer is the thorn gone. Then I know that God has answered. But he answered the first time, my grace is sufficient for you. Because my powers make perfect obedience. And he doesn't hear that. Because he's so focused on his pain. And God has got to repeat himself. I've already talked about this need for us to repeat ourselves with patience. God is patient with us. We need to be patient with one another. So in applying these truths to our children, let's remember that they're individuals. Let's remember to compare them with each other, therefore. Let's not frustrate them. Let's be age appropriate. Let's respect their boundaries. Let's be patient. Let's recognize that there are no guarantees in this game, and have a good, healthy picture of them that respects their dignity as image bearers. But there was one thing that the chairman mentioned to me. Let me just comment briefly on that. And that, in a sense, came up in our discussion earlier about the peculiar situation in which you find yourselves. You're in a context where you have you've been wired in a certain way, you've been brought up in a certain way. You have a culture. Please remember that you have a culture. And culture, this is how I define culture. The culture is the way in which a community, a group of people, responds to the challenges of living. That defines it very simply. And that's very general. The way that a group of people responds to the challenges of living. Whether it's about food, whether they eat dogs, or eat snakes, or eat or eat whatever. So that's the challenge of living. What kind of houses they live in, whether they live in huts or igloos or whatever. That's a culture that defines things like that. What is polite, what is not polite, who to marry, how do you describe marriage, what is a proper marriage, what is respectful, what is not respectful. That's defined by a group of people. They agree on certain things. I alluded to those right at the beginning, that that's different from biblical truth. So we agree that this is how things are going to be done. So you need to recognize that you have a culture. Your children are living in your home, so they're touched by your culture, but they're also in a different cultural environment. That's going to have an influence in their choices to the challenges that they face in living. So if you bring them up in Hong Kong, they're going to enjoy dog snacks. They're going to enjoy, snake biltong. Stuff like that. So you better get used to some of these things. So when you're weighing them and you're saying because I say so, because you're under my roof, do think more about the truth. Am I imposing truth, biblical truth, or am I imposing my own cultural values? Because we have a worldview, we have a way of looking at the world. And of course, as Christians, we're influenced by the biblical worldview. And from that, we derive things like values. What's important, what's not important, what's right, what's wrong. And from there, that informs our choices about how to behave, what to do. And as thinkers, we evaluate the experiences, we evaluate the choices that we have, and we make choices according to these authorities that we carry, that we've internalized in our lives. All that I would want to say is that let's help our children to internalize the truth as it is in the Word of God, so that when they're making choices, they have owned the values that are rooted in the Word of God. And I'm resisting going to a place where just a whole bunch of rules that we must apply, and if you apply these rules, then in hey presto, you're a Christian. It's a relational thing. It's relating to the one who is truth. And somehow, if he was in Zambia, he would behave like a Zambian. He would enjoy Finkwala, he would enjoy Inswa and all that kind of stuff. But that doesn't mean because you are his follower, you have to like figs. You have to like the things that he enjoyed in Palestine. There are some of those things that are cultural things. Jesus conformed quite a lot to the culture of his day. But he also was a misfit. Often he was in conflict with people who were shaped only by their culture. So he was always making reference to the will of the Father. What is written, this must be fulfilled, and so on. So the truth shaped the way that he went, not just his culture. And so you have to recognize that there is a culture you might not like, and it has values, and the only way you're going to combat them is to impart values to your children so that they can make the right kind of choices. So let me give one example of the way in which our values have changed, quite a lot. When I first came to the UK 50 years ago, it was most of you were born. Well, some of you may not have been born. So when I first came here as a teenager, going to school, there was still very strong Christian worldview and Christian values. Yeah. So people generally agreed about what was right and what was wrong with regard to sexual morals, particularly. So people made jokes about homosexuals. People knew nothing about living together. People respected virginity. I didn't know what a condom was. In the time that I was at university. When we came back to live in London in 1976, that was just a few years after I'd gone back to Zambia and come back, things had moved along so much that people were saying, who is anyone to tell me what to do? The idea of an agreed morality had already gone. And when it came to sexual morals, some very educated Oxford ladies said, I don't know, until I've slept with him. So, having sex was like just having a cup of tea, just like shaking hands, saying hello. It just becomes so casual. And then, of course, it was supported and influenced and buttressed by Hollywood and all the rest of it. And it's come to Africa. So that our friends in South Africa think that they're really so advanced because, they sanction same-sex marriages and African export to the US, the president there, pushing these rights. So the irony of it, the first couple that I married, in Zambia who happened to be British. The wife was with some other ladies, and this lady in that group was very proud of the fact that she was someone who respected freedom and rights and so on. And then she says something about, I can't stand these straight Christians. Huh? You respect everybody's rights, except those who are straight, except those who are Christians. Said, I'm a Christian, and I'm heterosexual. So you kind of turn things upside down, that if you are counterculture, or the old culture, if you're against that, then you're it. Then you're really with it. Then you're really you're really grooving with the modern beat. So things have changed in UK. Things have turned upside down. 2003, we were in London for a number of months, and at that time, the thing had come into the church. There was a guy who was being considered as a bishop in the Anglican church. There was a bit of an uproar still, so he withdrew. We flew over to the States a few weeks later, and there was another guy being considered as a bishop who was an acclaimed homosexual, and that went through. And the Anglican church has never looked back. And some therefore look to Africa to ordain them, because the church has said, this is a loving thing. Remember I said about, yes, grace is not the same as spoiling our children. Grace is not the same as we throw away all our standards. But yeah, things have changed. So these are some of the challenges that you have, and I don't pretend to have nice, straightforward, pre-packaged answers, but these are some of the things that you have to struggle with. And all I can say is that ultimately we equip our children with values that are rooted in the scriptures, that they see us respecting in our own lives, and hopefully that will influence their choices in this crazy world in which we find ourselves. And we have our own problems back home. And some of those are made even worse by the men of God, who basically preach a message. It doesn't matter what I preach, it's what I say you do, that's what you do. And you don't question the man of God. So we pray for one another, we bandana mano, we exchange notes, but let's be gentle with our kids. They're struggling with choices, with pressures around them that we need to try to understand, so that we can support them, and they know that we love them, they know that we support them, they know that we understand what they're struggling with. We're not just judges. We must not get to a point where children say, you don't understand. And that's a big barrier. When our children say to us, you don't understand what I'm going through, we've lost it. We have nothing to say to them that is going to be of benefit to them. We can call them Jim Tom Fan or the rest of it, that's not going to help. But let our children feel heard. Let our children feel that we understand what they're struggling with, and we can struggle with them to some useful conclusion. Well, sorry that the few words ended up in lots of words.